Welcome into Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf and Gavin Shaw here, and we have some positive Mitchell Robinson injury news updates. He might be back soon. Sounds like he's back to practice full time. How will the Knicks reintegrate him, and what are we excited to see when he gets back? All that and more, plus OG Anunoby out against the Nuggets. What's our concern level? Next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode, because we are here for you guys 5 days a week, if not more sometimes, but mostly back to a 5-day week schedule now. That's more of like the more is more for like trade deadline season and stuff, but you never know. That's why you got to have those notifications on. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at strick.land. And he's Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And Mitchell Robinson, maybe your favorite center's favorite center. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe that's Isaiah Hartenstein at this point. Regardless.
Well, if Isaiah Hartenstein's your favorite center, then he is your favorite center's favorite center.
Then he is your favorite center's favorite center. That's true, because they're best friends. So no matter what, whether Mitch is your favorite center or Isaiah Hartenstein is your favorite center, one of those two is going to be your favorite center. Somehow or another.
Favorite center,
or your favorite center's favorite center. I don't know. Either way, a lot of complex.
We could do 30 minutes of this and then call it an episode.
Yeah, let's break down the logistics of how exactly this all works. No, but great news on the Mitchell Robinson front out of practice today. We've got from Tibbs, Mitch was good. That's good to hear. Said he practiced today. He's got to go through contact for a while. So then he's got to get cleared by the doctor. It wasn't extended, obviously, meaning the practice, but he did shooting, offense, defense, script. Good day. And then Brian Windhorst added, also today, Mitchell Robinson should be back before the end of the month. They're only going to get better as long as they can get healthy, of course, referring to the Knicks. So, Gavin, this is big news for our New York Knicks. Mitch coming back is the latest well, okay. I would say the latest in good news about injuries. Obviously, OG Anunoby about to miss his second game after his elbow flare-up, but he did come back prior to the flare-up. Hopefully it is just that, and it's only a flare-up, which would mean that if Mitch comes back soon, then we're just short one Julius Randle for a full-strength Knicks team, as long as OG Anunoby's ailment is not anything serious. So I think this bodes pretty well for the Knicks going down the stretch run of the season here.
Yeah, I think they're in a great position, and it's going to be fascinating to see how Mitch adjusts to coming off the bench. Like Fred Katz had, I didn't put in our rundown, but he had another tweet saying, like, based on everything I'm hearing, it's likely Mitch will start coming off the bench. That's been your and my assumption for months. I feel like that's been just about everyone's assumption, except for a couple of YouTube commenters who I'm sure will be back. Welcome, guys, who say we're crazy every time we say Mitchell Robinson's going to come off the bench, or that he should come off the bench. I think he definitely should, but I also think we're talking about a guy who, from a rebounding perspective, was, I mean, certainly from an offensive rebounding perspective, the most dominant guy we've seen in the league for borderline the last decade. Like maybe Steven Adams, maybe Andre Drummond in their best seasons, like put up somewhat similar numbers, but it was a top 8 to 9 to 10 best offensive rebounding season in NBA history against starters. So what is he going to do against backups? The other areas I'm looking at are Mitch's efficiency. He was in the midst of, kind of surprisingly, given the rebounding numbers, you would have thought, all right, like physical dominance on the glass leads to easy putbacks, leads to peak efficiency. Instead, it was the least efficient season of his career. He was shooting just 59% from the field. His previous career low was 65%. This stat stood out to me even more, maybe just because his free throws were a little bit worse, but he was 22nd percentile in points per shot attempt. He had never been below 75th percentile in that statistic, and 3 times in his career, he was 99th percentile in that statistic. But I don't think you and I were ever talking about like oh, there's a massive athleticism drop off with him, because how could he, when offensive rebounding, like it's certainly about strength, it's certainly about positioning, but like at its core, like that is an athletic stat, and he was overwhelmingly good in it. So I look at it as a combination of small sample size, and that the Knicks continue to not put a lot of spacing on the floor, in particular because Julius Randle stopped shooting threes at really high volume and was starting to attack the rim a little bit more. So I think just in general, there was a bit more traffic around Mitch. And I think the other factor there is that teams were often, like, because of that lack of spacing, saying, all right, we're going to try to box this out with like 2 or 3 guys. And a lot of times when he was trying to get putbacks, they were against 2 or 3 guys. And I'm wondering if getting him into lineups with a lot more shooting, we can get into what those lineups look like in just a little bit, push those numbers up, just because there's going to be less of an ability to throw multiple bodies at him. And I wonder if that offensive rebounding rate, it's going to take a little bit of time, but could get even higher given that spacing and just given the fact that he's going to go against backups now.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was about to say. I think, if you need help with your efficiency, you can't do much better for yourself than just going out there against backups when you already eat against starters usually, and certainly destroy them on both ends as far as the rebounding is concerned. Now just go out there against backups, and all of a sudden you get those rebounds, and then you have a less talented defending center out there with you. I think that works out pretty well for Mitch, and will probably help the field goal percentage there. I also I don't know. I think it'll be good for him to come off the bench, to get to the, back to that part of the issue here. Like, I don't think it makes any sense to start him at this point. In fact, I think, considering the nature of his injury and everything else, regardless of if he goes through full practices and stuff like that, I would love to see if he could and I mean, like Tibbs has been really good about Hartenstein, for example, keeping his minutes down, making sure that he's not taxing him too much. Like, I think it'd be beneficial at first, bring Mitch out there for like 10, 12 minutes a game, his first like 2-3 games back, just kind of start getting him back in that flow. And like, you have the depth to do that. So like, you have a Precious Achiuwa who's been playing so well. And you have Isaiah Hartenstein, obviously, who's going to play 25 minutes and give you, some of the best 25 minutes you can get out of a center from anyone in the NBA right now with how he's playing. So bring Mitch in, ease him in. And, I think that you could maybe even look for a little, I don't know if you want to necessarily look for design plays for him, but you can certainly work up some more pick and rolls with him in the second unit, which I think would be beneficial for him trying to find his footing offensively again. I think you have a lot of guys that play with that second unit that really need the help of a good screen setter up top. And Mitch can do that when he really sets his mind to it. I know that, we criticized his screen setting ability for the first few years of his career because it just wasn't very good. And he would slip screens too early and stuff like that and not take the contact. But in recent years, he's gotten a lot better about seeing those through, taking the contact, really freeing up his ball handler to be able to make something happen. And, if you could do that for a Deuce McBride, if you could do that for a Bojan Bogdanovic, even an Alec Burks, maybe that makes life easier on any of those guys that are playing with second units, say nothing of like a Josh Hart or something. So that's kind of how I'm hoping to see him utilized. And I think the bench unit could really use a presence like Mitch right now, because he's different than Precious. And I think it's just, better in terms of if you need just a big body to set a screen to get a, not necessarily like 90th to 100th percentile, ball handler to, get that little extra bit of space that he needs. I think Mitch could be very beneficial for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be fun to see him as a rim runner, because we saw that a bit early in his career, and the Knicks just have never really had sufficient spacing to do that. And we've seen how Precious Achiuwa has just been totally unlocked in that capacity, how dominant him and Brunson are. And I'm just sort of curious, is it a skill at this point in Mitchell Robinson's bag? Because I think we're both on the same page. Like he's not quite, I know I was just kind of talking about this 2 minutes ago, but he's not quite the vertical athlete he was early in his career, but he's still enormous, and he still jumps ridiculously high, and he's still an incredible lob finisher. And he just brings obviously so much more size and physicality than Precious does running down the floor. I just don't know if he's quite as quick as Precious is, but I'm kind of fascinated to see what that looks like as a secondary source of offense. I guess the only concern there is if the majority of his minutes are with the bench, how much opportunities you're going to get to do that, because the bench does not really have a traditional point guard. And that's not to say that Deuce McBride can't throw like a pick and roll lob, or Dante DiVincenzo, if he's playing with that group, can't throw a pick and roll lob. But it's just something I'm interested to see that we've never really gotten with Mitch before. And I wonder what sort of secondary sources of offense they're going to find. The other stat I was really focused on with Mitch is his net rating this year. And just compared to Hartenstein's for the season is plus 9.2, which is obviously one of the better marks in the NBA at the center position or otherwise. Mitchell Robinson's was minus 2.5. And now I think that's a little bit representative of what iHeart brings to the table as a spacer versus what Mitch brings or doesn't bring as a spacer. But I also think it's the fact that iHeart got to start the season playing with Emmanuel Quickley, who's like a net rating god. And then he's had heaps and heaps of time with the net rating Thanos, OG Anunoby, with Mitch hasn't gotten to benefit from yet. But could there be some lineups where those two guys play together? We can get into that, Alex, in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks.
Yes, but first we got to let everybody know about our good friends over at Nissan. And are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Have you ever wondered what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. How about the 2024 Nissan Rogue? It's perfect for city drives and great escapes. Maybe you want to go up to the Catskills or something. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right in to the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. And the 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. But maybe you want to go a little bigger. Maybe check out the 2024 Nissan Armada. And it will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. It is definitely the best one that you can get. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further in the 2024 Armada. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com.
Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. I'm going to throw one out there for the people, Alex, tomorrow. Long Beach State, their coach, Dan Monson, who back in the day used to coach at Gonzaga. He got Gonzaga started as a Cinderella. He got fired. They went on to win their conference tournament. They are 19.5-point underdogs against Arizona. How could you bet against them now? I'm not betting on them to win straight up, but I'm taking that money line. I think they come out and play inspired. Nothing to lose. Team of destiny type feel. So I'm throwing some money down that way. But if you want to join me, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Alrighty, let's continue this conversation on Mitchell Robinson, Alex. I'm gonna throw like some lineups your way, and let's go through them one by one, and you can let me know what you think. So the first lineup I want to see with Mitchell Robinson is I spent all first segment talking about. I want to see him with legitimate spacing. Give me Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, OG Anunoby, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Mitchell Robinson, like 4 legit shooters around him. And we've seen teams do their best to box him out, be unable to box him out. What are they going to do when they have to like tag the 3-point line the whole time? I know we have to wait a little bit of time with OG to come back, but I am super excited to see those 2 defensive anchors surrounded by literally like 3 of the best shooters on planet Earth, and Brunson, DiVincenzo, and Bogdanovic.
I mean, that's to say nothing of the fact that OG himself is a 40% 3-point shooter most of the time. So, yeah. And one of the best shooters from the corner in the entire league, if not, I mean, maybe he's been disqualified thanks to playtime or whatever now at this point, but at a certain point, he was the leading guy for the right-hand corner in the entire NBA. So, or left-hand corner, I guess, if you're looking at the basket. Either way. Yeah, I would be excited to see that lineup as well. I wonder if Tibbs would allow that lineup out there, considering he just doesn't seem to want to play Bogdanovic all that much at this point. But for stretches, I don't think he could do much better as far as just getting pure shooting out there. And I mean, if we saw one thing in last year's playoffs, particularly the Cavs series, it's that Mitchell Robinson can get so many rebounds that, you know, even horrible shooting can be made up for by his contributions on that end. Like he completely turned that series around and turned around numerous games for the Knicks last year, where the Knicks for pretty much all last year were not a high scoring team, not a high 3-point scoring team. I should say they were actually pretty high just in overall offensive rating, but not very high in terms of 3-point percentage, and yet got as many points as they did thanks to Mitchell Robinson getting all those offensive boards. So that way, if you have that shooting lineup out there, even if they are missing, even if they're only quote unquote hitting like 35% of their threes or something, you've got a Mitchell Robinson in there, presumably single covered, which I don't think a single center in the NBA can single cover Mitchell Robinson on the glass and win it, because he's just that much of a dominant presence there. I think that would be a really solid lineup to watch. You dubbed this one the best bench lineup, and I think this is interesting to think about. Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Mitchell Robinson out there together. I'm curious what you think as far as playmaking is concerned with this lineup, because it does worry me a little bit. I mean, this would maybe be, in some ways, the lineup that I've been clamoring for a while, which would be the Bojan Bogdanovic initiating lineup, which I would love to see. I would love to see if he was out there running pick and rolls with Mitch in this lineup to get the action going, kicking it out to someone in the corner for an open three, and then himself fading back, Bojan that is, fading back out to the 3-point line, so that then you can start a kick it around the perimeter sequence, potentially find a shooter that way. And once again, just have Mitchell Robinson on the inside, ready to clean up the scraps. Of course, you also have Josh Hart there too, who I think, like I mentioned last segment, would be one of those guys that could really benefit from a strong pick up top to kind of free him up and give him the ability to get in all the way to the hoop. And then if you sort of have it happen where if he happens to be too strong on a layup, you suddenly have a Mitchell Robinson trailing behind him, potentially able to get a putback there. I think that's a pretty solid situation all around. So I can sort of see the vision, but do you worry that a lineup like that might have not quite enough playmaking in it?
I think that's obviously a concern anytime Jalen Brunson's not on the floor until Julius Randle comes back. So I hear you, but I think one of the things I've been most surprised by, and I'm fascinated to see if this changes, is like we really don't get a ton of minutes with Dante running the bench unit. And I've kind of like my underlying thought, like since the Knicks did not go and get a point guard at the deadline, has been that Dante is going to be functionally the backup point guard in the playoffs. And even if Deuce is out there, like Dante would be the one running the show. So I guess that's kind of supplementary to your Bojan initiator take, that like, all right, it could be him and Dante initiating offense. And then you have OG and Hart as sort of secondary options. Like I think those are probably, like, outside of Brunson, outside of Randall, DiVincenzo, Hart, Anunoby, and Bogdanovic in some order are the next 4 best initiators on this team. So you're kind of making up for it with numbers and the fact that you have 3 really good shooters in DiVincenzo, Anunoby, and Bogdanovic, and one who post All-Star break has certainly been solid in Josh Hart. So I think you maybe have just enough creation, just enough spacing to supplement that creation. And to your point, like Mitch to kind of be the anchor defensively. And just the fact that Hart and Anunoby lineups have been overwhelmingly good on defense. And then you add Mitch into the picture, who's as good as iHeart is. Like Mitch is maybe even a tad better if he's anywhere close to 100%. Like it feels like that's the rare Bogdanovic lineup that has enough to hold up defensively. But let me throw you an even better defensive lineup. What if they went Deuce, Hart, Anunoby? This is presumably we get Julius Randle back, but Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson. So this is one where Randle's the fulcrum instead of Brunson. You don't have a lot of creation around him. Maybe it gets a little bit stagnant on one end. But does that team give up a single point, Alex? Because that's an iron wall if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, I mean, there's no weak link there. I mean, I guess your weakest link would be either Josh Hart or Julius if he's
Randle,
not like fully locked in. Yeah. But if this is like the playoffs, for example, and Randle is locked in, ready to prove the haters wrong, all that stuff, like when he's locked in, especially as a one-on-one defender, he's pretty damn good. Like there's nobody that can really, I mean, we've seen him go one-on-one against like Luka Doncic in that situation, you know, and kind of lock him down. Like, I mean, he's as a one-on-one defender, fantastic. You know, we see that he loses his way when he has to be in help defense sometimes, and that's like the way to exploit him on that end. But even if you manage to lure him out of where he should be, then you still got Deuce and Hart and Anunoby and then Mitchell Robinson in the middle to deal with. It just seems like one of those situations where there's a very small chance that anyone is going to really find a true advantage against that defense. And for that reason, yeah, I mean, I think that could be the sort of lineup that the Knicks could go to. And honestly, that's a lineup that you could even take, not to turn this into a Hartenstein thing, but you could throw Hartenstein in there too. And that lineup would still be pretty unstoppable because both he and Mitch offer that level of rim protection at this point. So I would love to see that. But since we're talking about Mitch mostly, definitely a lineup I would very much like to see him in, especially because you don't sacrifice that much in the shooting department there either. Especially if Josh Hart, if it's one of those games where he's locked in, but you could, I think, just as easily move a DiVincenzo in there instead of Hart and still get, maybe not quite the man defense that you get, but certainly the event creation, like steals that DiVincenzo produces all the time. He'd get plenty of opportunities with that lineup. So I would love to see that as well. And then the last lineup here that, I mean, it could be, again, very similar to what like the starting lineup could potentially be if Mitch were able to take his spot back. But with one sub in, Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson. Again, you're basically talking about the same lineup as the last one, except for instead of Deuce, you just throw Jalen back out there. So you get so much more offensive potential with that lineup. And because of how good the rest of those guys are on defense at their best, like, I think you can fully absorb that. So count me in on this lineup as well. I think that's one that I would love to see, because I just think that you run into, then you have this perfect mix of defense, rebounding, and offense there that could potentially turn that into a very, very potent lineup.
Yeah, that might be the optimal one. And then obviously even just the starters, which is DiVincenzo in for Hart, like with Mitch, and you lean even a little further into offense, like again, like any lineup with Mitch and Anunoby, it's just hard to think that it won't be excellent defensively. Like you're just saying, all right, do you want to turn that up one extra notch and put Hart in for DiVincenzo? Do you want to turn that up two extra notches and put in Deuce for Jalen? But at some point it's almost overkill, and you're like, all right, let's find some two-way perfection here. And I do think you're going to see situations where again, it's the real shame and heartbreak of both Anunoby and Randall not being healthy, because it just feels like they could like get to lineups that would just overwhelm teams, where other teams have three bench guys on the court. And the Knicks are like, all right, this is like our kind of hybrid bench lineup. And it just all dudes that are going to kill you. So suffice to say, I'm very excited to have Mitchell Robinson back. But I also, before we finish up, I want to get into some lingering concern about OG Anunoby, as he's officially out for tomorrow. And then a little update on the Knicks race for the 3 seed. So we'll get into that in just a sec on Locked On Knicks.
But first, this next segment is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week. And I'm going to be honest, the ad copy says to highlight something in the sports department, but, I don't know, something about being worried about the Knicks, not winning a game against Denver or something seems a little trivial. So I'll just say something that I go through all the time with podcasting is you always are basically worried, like, is what I'm doing resonating with people? Are people enjoying what I have to say? Is this show fun? Is it something that makes people want to come back? Like all that sort of stuff. These are things that Gavin and I deal with on a daily basis. And I think I can speak for both of us when I say it's one of those things that'll keep you up at night sometimes, because the worry gets to you, the anxiety gets to you. And sometimes it's not best to just stay up at night and think about things like that, whether it's, things at work or things at home or whatever is kind of stressing you out. Sometimes you should probably look into therapy, and therapy could be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than favorite sports teams, or even first world problems of being a podcast host and worrying about people liking your stuff. And it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. So visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, and we're back in with some more updates. I mean, there wasn't really like a big money quote about this one, Gavin, but the injury report has come out, or at least the early version of the injury report, and the Knicks have listed OG Anunoby officially out for this next game against Denver to end the West Coast road trip. Personally, I don't find this to be super concerning, just because when they said that he went back to New York prior to the last game, I was like, okay, so he's probably going to miss the next game. I mean, they wouldn't fly him back to New York to just have him get treatment for a day or whatever, and then be like, all right, go back to Denver.
I mean, he could also get an MRI like wherever they are. It's not like he can only get an
exactly.
MRI.
It's not like you have to go to hospital for special surgery. So it seemed pretty obvious that they were like, let's sit you at least for these next 2 games. I would say that especially once they won in Golden State and guaranteed that this 4-game road trip ends up at least 3-1 for them, I think they were like, all right, let's get this guy figured out. Like let's send him home, get him some treatment, and hopefully he'll be ready to go once we're, back and fully back at home. So I'm not super concerned personally. Like, I don't know where you stand on this. We haven't really gotten to talk like about our feelings on the OG re-injury situation yet, but I haven't been too worried. Like, I kind of just think he's going through what people go through after surgery. I also was thinking about this the other day, and like when you're coming back from, say, an ACL surgery or something, it's such a long-term injury that there's never any urgency to get you back from it like ASAP. That I think that, when we've become conditioned now to guys coming back from surgeries, and if it's like an Achilles or an ACL or, some major injury like that, we just kind of get used to like, oh, they come back and then they're just 100% because that's what they trained for. And they made sure that they got to that point. Maybe they work off a little rust, but like the joint and whatever feels perfect by the time they're back on the court. This is a little different with OG. Like, I think that, because they're in the thick of a playoff race here, I don't know if they rushed him back, but I think that the second that they thought that he was good to play, they were of course going to be like, yeah, dude, let's get you on the court. Like, we need some help here. We need you to play for this team again, because we play so well with you out there. And, he's working through the pains of coming back from a surgery and dealing with, restoring range of motion in real time. And, with the, the pains that come with like breaking down scar tissue and stuff like that. Like, they probably had to make a decent sized incision in his elbow because they had to pull out like a bone fragment, So it's like, I don't know. I find myself just kind of being like, I'm not too worried. He doesn't seem to be complaining about it, like, I think this is just precautionary. We could see obviously that he was kind of short arming some stuff in the last game, which is why they obviously made the decision to sit him now for these last couple games. But I don't know. I kind of just feel like this is just maintenance, and hopefully with some treatment and whatever else, hopefully he'll be back, maybe by the time that the Knicks play Brooklyn.
Yeah, I think I'm generally with you. I have a underlying feeling of this team being snake bitten that I can't shake. And I know I've expressed like, I'm pessimistic that we're going to see like, and maybe this is obvious because there's no world where Julius isn't playing through some level of pain and some limited range of motion when he comes back, at least as far as I know and I understand it. I just don't feel like we're getting a fully healthy version of this team, but maybe we get a fully healthy version of OG, and like, at least like it's hard to trust Tibbs. It's hard to even trust some of the players at this point with the way the Knicks approach stuff. But like, their general take was like, yeah, this was like kind of expected. It's like, maybe it was a thing where it was like, all right, we won't know until you go out there and play 3 games in a row, like whether you're going to have pain or not. And like, at some point you just have to do it. So let's get it out of the way now. And if nothing happens, great. And if something happens, then we'll regroup from there. To your point, they have a little bit of wiggle room because of how well they've done. So overall, like I'm like kind of cautiously optimistic with like a lingering sense of doom underneath that, but we don't have to linger that on that, Alex, because tonight, despite the fact that the Knicks did not play a game, was a good night for the New York Knicks, with the Cavs falling to the Miami Heat. The Knicks are now just 1 game back in the loss column, just 1.5 games back overall. Of course, a loss to Denver now drops that to 2, but that is much better than dropping to 3 back when the teams have pretty comparable schedules the rest of the way. Like going into that Heat game and the Knicks Nuggets game, the Cavs had the 14th hardest remaining schedule according to Tankathon. The Knicks had the Knicks had the 14th. The Knicks had the 14th hardest remaining schedule. The Cavs had the 17th hardest. That should get a little bit closer with the Knicks playing the Nuggets, even if they lose that game. It seems like we are in a fairly good position to make a run at the 3 seed, depending on when Mitchell Robinson comes back and depending on when OG comes back. And maybe that was something we neglected to do with Mitch. Like when do you think we actually see both of these two on the court? And how do you think that translates to the Knicks maybe making a run at 3 and staying away from Boston another round, even if it's possibly at the expense of having a harder first round opponent?
Yeah, I could see. I mean, look, I'm not gonna try to predict when these guys will be back on the court because the Knicks are. If I've learned one thing this season, especially, it's that the Knicks keep their injuries under tight lock and key until the moment that the player is ready to come back, pretty much, and then maybe one day in advance you'll hear rumblings of this guy will probably be back tomorrow, but there's no like. Oh yeah, he's ramping up. We're hearing he'll probably be back in 7 days or something. Like there's none of that with this team. So I could very well see OG back for the Brooklyn game. I don't think that's unreasonable to think that would happen. I think they just sent him back from the West Coast swing just to get him treatment at home. But then once they're back at home playing Brooklyn, I would not be surprised if he played that game. Of course, with the possibility of like if the same level of discomfort is still there, then they can obviously like pull him, by halftime or something and say like, no, he's not coming back for a couple more games still. And then with Mitch, like based off the OG timeline, I'm thinking maybe the second game of these two at home. I believe it's the Nets and then the Pistons.
Yep.
Certainly no easier opponent you could come back against and try to get your feet wet than the Pistons this season. So that might not be a bad target. That's 2 games away. And that was sort of similar. Like once we start hearing about OG ramping up a couple weeks ago, then like 2 games later, we saw him, come out for the Knicks again and play. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get Mitch back in then before the road trip, the little mini road trip to, was it Toronto and who's the other? It's another not super imposing opponent, but a pretty like relatively easy, little stretch of 4 games here would really be a good opportunity for him. And I guess the other factor is Julius Randle too.
The Spurs are the other.
Oh, the Spurs. Yeah. I mean, Wembanyama, I guess, to deal with, but of all people, I think that Mitch would actually have a pretty good time against Wembanyama.
I mean, he did a good job the first time, right?
He did. Yeah. So I think Wembanyama's gotten a good deal better since then, but
for sure.
I mean, they'll have Hartenstein too.
Well, it'd be fun to watch. I want to see Mitch against this version of Victor. And I think as long as Mitch is relatively in his prime, like that is going to be a matchup I'm excited to see like the rest of their careers.
That's true. That should be really fun. Either way though, hopefully Mitch Day will come back for that. The other factor is Randall. And there's been some talk, lately of like Randall is still not quite there as far as
he's not taking contact.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get the feeling that once he gets cleared for contact, it won't be a long runway for him. I think we'd be foolish to assume, like, I don't want to like call people out by name or anything, but like I saw stuff happening in our YouTube comment section where people were like, Randall's conditioning must be crap. Like, oh, he's not even doing contact work. So like he's going to come back and he's going to be terrible. It's like, no, I'm pretty sure that he's just waiting for like them to say go and then he's ready to rock. Like everything that we've seen from Randall is that he's working really hard right now and basically doing everything except throwing his injured shoulder into people at the moment. So I think that it's going to be a quick turnaround with him too. Like whenever we hear about, oh, Randall's starting to take contact, it might only be a game or 2 before we see him then. Because as soon as he's clear, I get the feeling he's going to want to be back out there. So I don't know. I don't want to make like predictions or whatever, but I think maybe within the next like 5 or 6 games, we might see all 3 of these guys back. And if that's the case, then I definitely think they have a chance of making the 3 seed, because even if they just get one of those guys or 2 of those guys back, they might have enough of a chance to make the 3 seed. Maybe Mitch by himself would not carry quite as much weight given the fact that the center position has been held down so well. But yeah, I feel really good about the Knicks potentially becoming a top 3 seed this year. And I think that's the position they should want to be in. Because, you know, short of if they could get the 2 seed somehow, but avoid that Celtics half of the bracket and give yourself a chance to potentially face like the Milwaukee Bucks in the second round, who I think you match up with a little better. And certainly, you know, I think the Knicks can out physical any team, but could definitely out physical that team. I'd feel real good about that. So, and I think that should definitely be what they're striving for at this point.
All right, I like the optimism. I'm not going to muddy the waters with any negativity. So we'll wrap up right there. He's Alex Wolf. I'm Gavin Shaw. We'll have you covered tomorrow with the recap of the Nuggets game. But until then, sleep well. I've never said that before, but we're recording this late at night, so sleep well, and we'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks.